I actually found out about it one day before the program closed, like for signing up. My English teacher, Miss Mack, she's the best. She showed us poetry out loud in class one day, and I decided that I wanted to do it. So I went to the website for Arts Washington, and I applied one day before the deadline. I think it was like 3 hours before it closed. Well, I really like Emily Dickinson and the TV series Dickinson, so I wanted to do a poem written by her, actually. But then when I got looking at Emily Dickinson poems, they were all very short, and I wanted to do a longer poem. So I found this one about her, and thought that it would fill the need for Emily Dickinson in my life.
Well, reciting poetry for me is kind of new. I just started this year, but I feel like it really helps me encapsulate my emotions through the poem and connect with the poetry in a different way that I never would have thought of. So it helps me recollect my thoughts into the poem, and it allows me to exemplify myself through the poetry.
Do you feel like you learned something about the poet?
Oh, yes. I feel like the poet really encapsulated their emotions and how they went through their life in this poem. And I feel like it really, really reflects on a lot of people. It really resonated with me personally.
Well, my dad started talking to me about how instead of trying to like morph my words to like be like how the poet made it to be, I need to actually do it how I would do it. Like I'm in drama and everything, so I think I'm good at my words. And so I tried my best to keep part of me in the poem in my ways of speaking, and keeping that in the back of my brain really helped me with that.
Well, I didn't really like poetry that much, but then I found this poem and I really, really liked it. And I just found out that there were like poems that actually made sense that are really good. And it's an experience. I didn't, I think the thing I learned about myself through poetry was that I realized how much cartoons I watched as a kid and how much I used that to shape my world. It's, and like that poem, it was a lot.
When I was looking for poems, I think you said at the start of the program that one of the goals with Poetry Out Loud is connecting students with poems that they have an attachment to or can understand. And for me, the last 2 years have come with a lot of loss, and unfortunately, that does include the death of a couple of very close family friends. And it was something that was really weighing on my mind when we started doing poetry out loud in my classroom. And for me, Avon Boland really beautifully describes the experience of loss, but also realizing how everything is interconnected and you don't ever really lose people forever when you can realize how they're still around you, and especially living in Seattle where it is constantly rainy in a way similar to similar to Ireland. I felt like the idea of water and the natural elements of rain and the weather around us, but also feeling a really profound sorrow. I think Evan Boland connects those two things very eloquently in a way that is beautiful to read, but I also felt gave me words that I didn't really have to understand how I was feeling.
Well, for me, I never recited poems before, and I gave it a try, and I really enjoyed it, and I really think you can learn something from reciting poems, and you can really amaze people with how well you do it and how you recite it.
It makes me feel unjudged and kind of free because I don't necessarily do poetry in front of other people. So when I'm reciting it through Poetry Out Loud, um, I feel more like I'm accepted to be able to do it because I've loved poems my whole life. Um, And I wanted to do this poem since 7th grade and see how far I could make it. So really, I just am happy to be able to recite.
Well, I found this poem pretty early on in the year. I found it, I think, in around September. And that was right around when we were going back to school in person full time. And I had a lot of anxiety around that, and I felt very conflicted. And I feel like this poem is a lot about conflict and the hope that we can find through it. That last stanza especially just really spoke to me in that, it's hard to see the hope sometimes, and it's hard to see all the people that are supporting you, but they're there, and they're always there for you. And that last stanza just got me through a lot of the anxiety that I had about, COVID and returning to school. And this poem has just been such a source of hope for me.
I think that it appeals to me because the message that I got out of it is that the world as we know it is always changing. It's always evolving, always moving, and the author, I think, is mourning the loss of a world that he knew and that he loved. And he finds solace in his love, the one thing that he can control and kind of stop from changing. And I think that appeals to me because the world is changing very rapidly at this point. And I feel a very strong grief for the world that I knew when I was younger. And it's a bit odd since I'm only 18, but I think that's probably the biggest reason that it appeals to me. I think that I would tell them that this opportunity, giving students the ability to express themselves through poems that they chose personally, is something that can, one, really help grow love for poetry in English, and two, just give them more room to express themselves, and it would be really liberating, I think.